We're learning the fourth Sikha on Parsha Shoftim in Chelek of Daled on page 121. The Shir today is being learned, Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Nasha Koltman. Vayim Seif from the Heintige Sedre, in the end of this week's Parsha, in the Parsha from Egla Rufa, in the Parsha of Egla Rufa. This is the Parsha where the Torah talks about a case where a person is found dead outside a city, and it's not known what happened, who murdered him. So you have to bring a calf to that place and chop off its head. Steht in Pasuk, so the Torah says, "Vayiridu ziknei irahi." The elders of the city should bring down there to this place as a egla, a calf, el nachal esan asher lo ya'avid by v'lo yizara, to a nachal esan, and it's in a valley, in a area where the ground is tough and hard, it was never worked with, it was never planted, and va'orfu sham egla banachal, and there the head of the calf should be chopped off. Is Rashi mefarish ifn vard va'orfu. So Rashi explains the word va'arfu, that it means as follows. Kaitzitz arpa, you chop off its head from its neck, bekupitz, with a long knife. Rashi adds, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says here in this case, Tavai egla bas shnasa, let a calf that's a year old come, shalayasas apedes, it never produced fruits, meaning it never gave birth. V'tei'aref, and it should be killed by chopping off its neck, b'makay she'enais apedes, in a place on this hard piece of land that also never produced anything. This is to atone for the murder or the killing of this individual that was found there. And he wasn't allowed also to produce any fruits. And when it says here that he wasn't allowed to produce fruits, as the Gemara concludes, it means that he wasn't allowed to do mitzvahs. The Makir from Pirish Rashi is in Gemara. The source of what Rashi says here comes from the Gemara, explaining what the details of Egla Rufa is representing. What's the Indian? What's the point here? Says Abu Yudua, but it's known as in Yonik from Pirish Rashi ala Teire is wie Rashi allein sagt. Rashi's whole approach in explaining everything in Teire, as Rashi himself says, Ani lo basi el pshute shel mikra. I'm only here to explain the simple understanding of the pasuk. Und bringt Midrash Chazal nor damelt wenn es muchrech pshute shel mikra. And he only quotes from the Medrash when it's necessary to explain the simple pshat of the pasuk. Is nit move on, benidden die done. If so, in our case, it's not understood. Why is it necessary for Rashi to add the explanation that it says in the Gemara about the content of this mitzvah, what Hashem says should be done here? It's a sort of giving a reason for the details of this mitzvah. Mitzad pshutish mikra is nita ken hechrech zu suchen taimim of pratia mitzvahs. Learning the simple pshat of psukim, it's not necessary to look for reasons and explanations for the details of a mitzvah. So why here does Rashi find it necessary to explain the meaning of the details of this mitzvah? Additionally, it needs to be explained. Aleph, why does Rashi use the expression when he begins to explain this that Hashem said, "Was nitragel b'pirushai by andere It's not a common expression that Rashi uses in similar cases when he explains something like this. Uns is moving bepashtus, as Rashi darf es nicht sagen, weil alle Inyanim von Teire is Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's self-understood that everything in Teire is the Eibishter saying this. Und Afapi, as das is the Lashon Gemara, although this Rashi is seemingly just quoting the expression that says in the Gemara, is aber Rashi b'pirushe ala Teire nicht eisen zum meitig sein Lashon Gemara ad medrash v'chayetze b'zeh. But Rashi, in his Pirush on Teire, is actually not here to just quote statements from the Gemara or Medrash verbatim. Befrat as a git der beinetzu die Werte dosher rabbeinu v'chayetze b'zeh. Especially that in our case, Rashi does not add that here, this is from our sages that have expounded and explained it, and therefore Rashi is not quoting. Und das ist noch mehr muchach davon, was choles Pirushe da, is a meshane von Lashon Gemara. In our case, it's even clearer because Rashi actually changes from the language that appears in the Gemara. So why is that these two words of Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which seemingly is self-understood, does Rashi quote from the Gemara? Another question is, either way, Favos is Rashi mitzaref dem inyan Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu tovei eglachulu v'hemshech to sein pirish oiva arfai kaitzitz arpa bekopitz. Why does Rashi bring here this point the Gemara says about the details of the mitzvah following the way he explains this detail of Va'arfu, that the head is chopped off with a long knife. The reason that Rashi brings explaining why a calf and why in this kind of area is nitav dem prat from Va'arfu. It's not related to the detail of the chopping off of the head. Not of dem tzivui b'chlalusai. It's coming to explain the general mitzvah here, the details that are involved. Favas menen peloshen Rashi and egla bashnasachulu. Why is it a calf that's a year old? And the place to be chosen to kill it is in a place that is hard, in a tough area that was never worked. That the point that's being addressed here is why the calf and why in a nachal. And that's not related to va'arfu, the chopping off. Rashi had gedacht stellen die zwei inyanim in zwei besondere dibra maschos. The 2 points Rashi is addressing should be in 2 different parts of the pasuk. Might examine dem word va'arfu. First, to quote the word of the pasuk va'arfu im upteichen, and to translate kaitzitz arfa bekupitz, that it means to chop off the head with a long knife. Und danach aber sunde dibra maschol mit die Werte va'arfu shames egla banachal. Then to bring the words that include more of the pasuk, that this is being done to a calf in the nachal, and then tam, and there to explain the reason, explaining the reasons for why the calf and why in this location. Other, or alternatively, bring in them tam bas chalas perusha of the pasuk. Rashi could bring the reasoning for the details of the mitzvah here when he explains the beginning of the pasuk. In Friedrich and Dibra Maschel, where Rashi explains the words al nachal leisam, whereas mefarish kosha shalei nevet, a hard, tough place that was never worked with. There would be appropriate to explain the significance of that. But what Rashi explains here from the Gemara, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is certainly doesn't seem to be connected to the detail of Arfa Bekupitz, the chopping off of the head. So we can say that the explanation in this Rashi is as follows. Rashi goes out of his way here to explain the reason of the details of this mitzvah because there's something unusual here. Al derech haragol usually is nit darkish or Rashi b'pirushi al atayretz mefarer zayin d'taimei mitzvahs. It's not Rashi's approach to explain reasons for mitzvahs. But when you come here to such a mitzvah, was is nit behesem mit klali v'tzivui atayre b'chlal. It doesn't fit into what we see in the klalim and the mitzvahs that we have in Torah till this point. Dort muss Rashi sich stellen mefarish zayin dem tam hashini. Here Rashi has to stop and explain why is there something that's different here in this case, different than all other cases that are similar to this, where there's klalim of how you see in the Torah that things are done. So over here in our case. So here the Rabbi gives us an introduction of what we find in Torah. What's the klal regarding cases similar to this? When it comes to bringing and slaughtering an animal for any purpose that's used for a person, so we find until our parsha a few categories. Aleph, one is karbonis, v'sinyanim is kapara. We find those karbonis that the point here is for an atonement. K'muforish and parshas Vayikra and Tzav, as elaborated upon in the 2 parshas of Vayikra and Tzav. Beis, another category, in Yonom, dankin for brachas, karbonis that are brought to thank Hashem for blessings. Other brengen brachas, or karbonis that bring about blessings. Gimel, a 3rd category, v'zei irinis zu metar zayin. It's a carbon that's being brought in order to purify a person. Vi by mitzayre, as the case with a mitzayre, zais tia tairis ha-mitzayre b'yom ta'arasai. This is what's done with a mitzayre on the day of his purification. V'tziva ha'kayin v'lokech la'mitar shtei tziparim chayis. You take 2 live birds and you bring them outside to the person where he is to purify him. On the chiluk b'neihem, and the difference we find between these categories is karbonis l'chaper, other v'lechazen shayach tzibrochis, those karbonis brought as an atonement or related to blessings that a person received from Hashem. Werden gebracht in Mishkan or Beis HaMikdash lofnei Hashem. The place they are to be sacrificed is in the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash in front of Hashem. The place that Hashem chose that He dwells there. Was the akrava lifnei Hashem is poil then v'nirtzaloi l'chaper olav. Bringing these sacrifices there in the place of Hashem, that brings about the atonement. and the chaper, Oder lifnei Hashem makar brachas, or it's to be brought in front of Hashem, being that you're thanking Hashem for the blessings, Hashem being the source of these blessings. That's when it comes to these two categories that are related to atonement or blessings of Hashem. So it's to be brought there in the place where Hashem dwells, in the Beis Hamikdash. Then you have another category regarding the two birds that are brought for the mitzvah. To purify him is asiyasan l'chutz lamachne. Whatever has to be done with them is there, where the person is, where the mitzvah is, outside of all camps. Chutz l'shalish machnes, outside of 3 camps in the makim ha-mitzvah, the place where the mitzvah is. Shenistalach sham b'mei chalutai. He's there and he remains there after he is confirmed to be a mitzvah. Zol nitar werden, and then this will purify him. Und kenen reinkommen in machne, and he'll be able to come back into the camps. Und demol bringen the karbanis bebeis hamikdash l'chaparasai, and he'll be able to come into the Beis Hamikdash and bring the karbanis to atone for himself. Je findet noch 2 karbanis, was euch sehr akrove is nit bebeis hamikdash. Additionally, we find there are other 2 karbanis that are brought not inside the Beis Hamikdash. The soir hamishtalech b'yom kippurim. There was the goat that was sent to a mountain to be thrown off the mountain of Azazel on Yom Kippur. Para aduma, and the red heifer that was brought and sacrificed outside of the Beis Hamikdash and then is also used to purify people. So what is the reason why they are both on the outside? This goat that's sent outside is also referred to in the pasuk as a chatas. Shnei seire izim lechatas, as the pasuk there says that there are 2 that are brought as a chatas. One is actually sacrificed on the mizbeach, and another is sent away. So although this chatas that's sent away is not sacrificed on the mizbeach, is aber the iker ma'isa kapara shal yadei, but nevertheless the main action that's done with it that brings the kapara was das is the v'samach v'hisvada of the kohen that leans his hand on it and he confesses as kol aveinos b'nei Yisrael, all the sins of Yidden, and then v'nasan gaimer vet getan lefnei Hashem ba'azara. That does have to be done specifically in the Beis Hamikdash in front of Hashem inside the azara. Das was weggeschickt al eretz gzeira. Then after that, once it's sent off into the desert, onto a big mountain, is the kavanah that by avekshikin kol aveinos from Bnei Yisrael. Here, what's happening is it's to send away the sins of Yidden that it carries with it. As the pasuk says, v'nosa asar olav es kol aveinos al eretz gzeira, that it carries with it all the sins of Yidden away. Das is aber al pipshute shel mikra nit kein ma'isa hakrove. There is no act of sacrificing this carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash, nor hafchai. It's on the contrary, it's the opposite. It's sending it away from the Beis Hamikdash, sending away the sins. But the part of the Sar HaMishtalech that brings the atonement, the main part is done by the smicha and the confession, which is in the Azara Lefnei Hashem, similar to all karbanis. Leidach, on the other hand, by Para Aduma. When it comes to the Para Aduma, Chachas Eichas Yasa as Mechutz LaMachne, what's done with it is also outside of the Machne, Chutz L'Shalish Machnes, outside all 3 Machnes, is the Chaber Inyana. But what is the point of the Para Aduma? Hechsher v'agdame, it's all to prepare and make it possible to machen the mechatas, to prepare the waters that when it's burnt into ashes and then you mix it with the waters, letar metumas meis, to purify a person that is tummy from a dead body. Kenen makriv zan carbon b'mikdash, to have the possibility to then come to bring a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. Similar to the mitzvah, here it's also to purify the person, to prepare him to then come into the Beis Hamikdash. Und das was es wird angerufen chatas, the fact that you find regarding the Para Aduma that it is referred to in the pasuk as a chatas, seemingly it is the inyan of a carbon for a kapara, not just a tare to purify the person to be able to come in. Zaktach Rashi, so Rashi explains the term chatas there, loshen chitui kipshutai, that the simple meaning of the chatas here means to cleanse, to purify the person. Ulufi hal chaysav, because of certain halachas that apply to it, kara akas of chatas, the Torah gives it the name chatas loymashik kachim lasabana, that it's compared to all other kachim that it's forbidden to take any personal benefit of it. So that in that sense it's called a chatas, but really the point of this is not like a chatas; it's to purify a person, and therefore it's done outside the machna. This is not al pi medrash agade was Rashi is maitik. However, Rashi does bring a medrash. You say the Rabbi Moshe Adarshan, quoting from Rabbi Moshe Adarshan, the Pratev Inyane Kapara from Para Aduma. He explains the details of how the kapara, what's done with the para aduma, so that it's similar and it resembles a chatas. Falafel pi as irasiya is bachutz, even though that what's done with it is outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Zenen abada in ir in yanim and carbon. There are things that are done with it that are somewhat similar to our carbon. See, that zayin b'kayin has to be done with a kayin, and achmem mitzvah b'sgan has to be with the sgan of the kayin gadol, and v'shachat oisa lefanov, and then there is the shechita does have to be lefanov, a place that's right across of the Beis Hamikdash. V'hiza anleichach pnei oyel mayid, or lefanov perhaps means in front of the kayin, and then you spray the blood towards the oyel mayid. So those are things that resemble the akrava of a carbon. But that's a medrash. In the simple pshat though, of what a para aduma is, it's for tara, and therefore it's done outside. That's what we find in the category of karbanis, or karbanis that are brought for a tara. They're not really karbanis, they're just a tara preparing to then come into the Beis HaMikdash. So you have it the way it is in the klalim of the Torah up until this point. The parasha seinu aber. However, now we come here to the mitzvah of Egla Rufa. By Egla Rufa, zetmen in ganzen anayim minyan. Here we see something that's completely new and different. Von ein Seite wird gesagt, as you tut auf the minyan from kapara. On one hand, the pasuk clearly says that the point there is an atonement. Kaper la'amcha Yisrael goyme v'nechapel lem adam. To bring a kapara to the Yidden, and the blood that's spilled there should be atoned for. Nit an inyan von tara metuma. We're not talking about a concept of purification, like the case of the Mitzayra or the Paraduma. Aber leidach, but on the other hand, isn't them the talk kain dimyim v'shayches to karbonis. We see no similarity, no relation at all to what's done here to the way things are done with a carbon. Nitten mokim, not regarding the location where this is done. Men brengt es nit zum Beis HaMikdash. It's not brought to the Beis HaMikdash or a mizbeach v'chulu, or in any sort of a mizbeach. Afilin it noichach HaMikdash, not even similar to the para aduma that resembles a carbon by the fact that it's to be brought in a place which is across of the Beis HaMikdash. Nit b'negeya the oisia aveda. Not also regarding who is the one that does what has to be done here with this calf. Nothing is done here through the kainim that are the ones that bring karbanis. And the Rebbe clarifies that Tzivoy v'nikshu ha'kainim b'nei Levi, when it says that the kainim should come here, but tzitzich b'pashtas zum zman von nach der arife. That's referring to what's done after they chopped off the head of this calf. Ha'kainim ma'imrim kapilam Yisrael. The kainim are the ones that announce and say that Hashem should atone for Yidden. On nit and ma'isa aveda. It's also not similar to a carbon when it comes to what's being done with this calf. As nidak ken ma'isa shchita. There is no slaughtering of this animal, zrika v'chulu, to spray the blood. So this is something which is very unusual. On one hand, the Torah says this is a carbon, it's called kapara. At the same time, what's being done with it is totally different than anything we know of till this point regarding what a carbon is and how it's to be brought. So now here the Rebbe clarifies, when we were to say, as the pull is by Egla Rufa, and employs a simon voice, everything being done here with the Egla Rufa is only some kind of a symbolism, some kind of a sign to show us and demonstrate something. Valderech, the under Mefarshim Taichin, as we see other commentaries say and explain, as Keshem She'eglot Tama Unikia Shli Asa Shum Davar, that the symbolism here is that just like this calf is pure and didn't do anything wrong, so too the ground here has never been touched and it's fresh as is from creation, it's never been used. So too what we're demonstrating and saying here is that we are clean from this act that happened here, this person that was killed, and we don't have anything to do with this. Similar, they washed their hands. Simin, this is also symbolizing Kishem Shiyadain Nikiya, is just as our hands now are washed and clean, Kach Onu Nikiya Michal Zeh. So too we are clean from the body that was found dead here. So if that's the point of what the Egla Rufa is, it's a ois and a simin, a symbolism, what not given kein starke kasha. Then there's no strong question. Favos the oibishte heist machen azas simin. Why Hashem says that this is the kind of simin to make the point there that we're clean from the dead body found here. However, and when you read the simple pshat of the pasuk, is mashma as the ala maisim zenachalokim from the maisa kapara. That all details that it says here in the pasuk of what's being done with this calf, the chopping off of its head and so on, is all part of what brings about the atonement, like a carbon that brings a kapara. If so, the question is a shaila like pshute shel mikra. Das is nit behesem zu heraas hateire wie sei wo es wird getan kapara. This is not fitting with anything that we saw in Torah up until this point, how and where and when the kapara should be done. As es is durch hakravas hakarbanis l'Hashem al yedei kayin bebeis hamikdash, that it's by bringing karbanis for Hashem, where through the kayin in the beis hamikdash. So why is this kind of a carbon, which is called kapara, so different? That doesn't fit into any of the categories that we see up until this point. Nachme, furthermore, regarding karbanis, says an iser v'chiv kares of shchutei. It's forbidden, and you're liable with kares when you bring a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. As the pasuk says, "Well, pesach el moed lo yaviu lahakriv carbon l'Hashem," that if you didn't bring the carbon to the Eibishter in the Beis Hamikdash, es muzayin asher yaviu bnei Yisrael ezavcheim goyim l'Hashem al pesach el moed el hakayim v'zavchu goyim v'zara goyim al mizbach Hashem. That the karbanis of Yidden should be brought and everything should be done with it. It should be sprayed the blood on the mizbeach, not anywhere outside. So because this is so different, so unique, out of the categories of anything that we find in karbanis that are for kapara up until this point, the Rebbe is Rashi mefarish. So Rashi comes and explains us, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that here it's an exception, and Hashem comes and says, Tavai eglo bashnasa goyme v'tayarav chulu. Da is an amira neisefes, miyuchedes from the Meibishn. Here there's an additional statement, unique and special in this case, that Hashem comes and says, an inyan shel chiddush legabe shara Torah, something that's new and novel in contrast to other things in Torah. Anaya oifen from kapara. This is a new concept of kapara. Was is nit wie karbanis v'shar in yane kapara in the Torah. Not similar to karbanis and other cases of kapara that the Torah has mentioned until here. Da kommt die kapara durch den peule, durch dem was die peule und der mokim und der carbon sind behesem zu die pratim in der harike. Here, the kapara will be brought about by an action that will be taken in the place and in relation to details of what it's coming to atone for, the death of this person that was found here. It's a different type of kapara. Apizem, move on, as das was Rashi is mefarish. So based on this we understand why Rashi first explains, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tovei Eglo Chulu, that you bring here this calf. So Rashi explains this, Behemshech zu after he explains that what's done here is that you chop off its head with a long knife. Is nit norval the shini von arife on nit schite. It's not only because the fact that you chop off its head from its neck and not to slaughter it, to shecht it like all other kabbanis. Bavais as does is nit kem pu'ula from kapara v'yu kabbanis b'chlal. So that is already something that shows that this is something that's unusual, and it's something that's done with the animal like all other kabbanis. Additionally, well, this is a prat ikri. This is a very main detail here in what is done here. Was is machriach den pirish von Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that brings us to the conclusion that this is something unique that the Eibishter says should be done in this case, a different type of kapara than we find regarding karbanis in general, and that will be explained there in the continuation. So we now understand the emphasis of Rashi, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a unique amira miyuchedes that the Eibishter comes and says that the kapara here is different in the kapara of karbanis. So to understand what's unique about the way its head is chopped off from its neck. So we'll understand this behektim was frier. We find this in another case as well in Parshas Boy by Petach Hamor, by the firstborn, a firstborn donkey. We're there. The Torah says that you should exchange that and give a kayin, a lamb instead of this donkey. And if you don't, so then you have to chop off its head. It's Rashi mefarish v'im loy sifte. If you don't redeem it from the kayin va'arafta, you chop off its head. Oirfoid v'kupitz ma'achayra v'hoirgai. You chop off its head from its neck and you kill it. And the reason is, who hifsid b'mayne shel kayin. This individual brought a loss to the money, to the value that belonged to the kayin. Lefichach yafsid b'mayne. Therefore, a loss should be brought to what he owns here. So there, Rashi also is explaining why we're doing this, why we're chopping off its head from its neck. Now the question though is, was is Rashi da mishana from Pirushay beParshas Boy? Why is Rashi here use a different expression than in Parshas Boy? Vuchach as ezaktem tam hu hifsed chulu behemshich lePirushay vida oy va'araftoi. Just like in Parshas Boy, Rashi explains the reason for chopping off its head. After he explains what va'araftoi means, zok der niter by Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu vi b'Parshasenu. However, the difference is there Rashi does not use the expression of Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem says that this should be done like He does in our parsha. Pianal, based on what we explained before, why Rashi adds the words of Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our case is a smuvan. It's understood why it's not necessary to say Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu by the case of the Petach HaMoyer. Rifel legabe shchite, chopping off from the neck, comparing to slaughtering an animal, is misa b'ofen achzari, is a death that's cruel, that's more painful. This is something that brings the death to the animal with pain. It's a more of a cruel death. When you shecht from the throat, you're not breaking the bone on the neck of the animal, from tzavra v'chulu. Is even a child can see the difference. And Rashi is masber by Petach HaMoyer. So therefore, by Petach HaMoyer, Rashi explains, das was Teire sagt im loisi pade va'araftoi, that if you're not going to redeem this donkey and give the kain what he deserves, his lamb, so then you have to chop off its head. Meint nit as the mensch hat a breide von zwei gleiche mitzvahs. What the Torah is telling us here is that a person shouldn't think that I have an option. I have two mitzvahs. I can do one or the other, and they're both the same. They're equal. And what's the choice? Either tifta b'seh, either redeem your donkey with giving the kain the lamb, and the other option is va'araftoi, to chop off its head. Now, it's not two equal choices. The pa'ula von oirfe bekupitz ma'achayre v'harga chulu, v'harga that is an einish. This is actually a punishment for not doing the mitzvah that you were supposed to give the kain the lamb. And that is hayais hu hifsid b'mayne shel kain lefichach yafsid b'mayne. Since you brought a loss to the kain, so now you are going to lose your money. Kedei madgish zayin, as das is an inyan von hefsid. So Rashi here is coming to emphasize the point that this is not just another option of what should be done, but it's actually something which is a loss that was caused there. Vertas getan, and then meifim from va'araftoi. So therefore, it's not being slaughtered the way the shechita usually happens in an unpainful manner, but it's coming through va'araftoi, chopping off its neck. Was is that achzarius? It's cruel. The hefsid b'chai achamoyer, and bringing the loss of life of this donkey. And therefore, this pain and suffering is experienced by the owner of this donkey to some extent. That a person is also moved by what he sees, the animal that he owns, the pain that it experiences. And that's the point here, in this case. To show the person that he should see the pain that's caused by his choice not to fulfill the mitzvah. So there's an aspect of an einish that's here by the va'araftoi. That's Rashi's explanation. As Oktab in the Dartin, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but there, Rashi does not add the words that Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu that which says that there's something novel about this. Varam dort is nitakin shini legabe mitzvahs dugmasei, because we don't see something that is different or unique comparing to other mitzvahs that are similar. This is not ken carbon, kapare, teide, tare, v'chulu. This is not in a category of a carbon or for an atonement or thanking Hashem or to purify. It's simply an einish for the person not giving the kain, the lamb that he deserves. That's the pshat in Rashi in Parshas Boy. When we come to the va'araftoi here in our parsha with the Eglah Rufa, an inyan from kapare, where the Torah clearly says that this is a kapare, is chach as the prat from mokim. Vudas vet getan. When it comes to the detail of the location where this is done, nachal leisan kosher shalei neva, the hard place that was never worked with, is nitvi bekapare shalidei karbanis bebeis hamikdash, and that's not similar to the atonement of karbanis that are supposed to be done in the Beis Hamikdash. But the prat from va'araftoi, but you may think that when it comes to the detail of chopping off its head, is v'beichatas ha'oif u'malakas roishoi memulapai, that it's similar to when you shecht a bird. It's not done actually with shchita. It's done with a sharp nail where the kain cuts off the neck of the bird. From the neck of its bird, it cuts off its head. So over here, when it comes to cutting off the animal's head from its neck, it seems like it's similar to the malika that's done in the Beis Hamikdash. So there is some similarity to what's done here with the Eglah Rufa to one of the karbanis in the Beis Hamikdash. The far Dr. Rashi, so therefore the first thing Rashi comes and tells us and is mefaret and elaborates and explains, Even though Rashi explained the meaning of the word arifa, to chop off, a few times before already. But Rashi repeats it and explains again, kaitzitz, arpa, bekupitz, that he chops off its neck with a kupitz, with a long and sharp knife. On at his oich mishane von Lashon Mishnah, Rashi uses a different expression than it says in the Mishnah, oirfen, oisa bekupitz ma'acherah, and Rashi uses the term kaitzitz, that he chops off its head. What is Rashi highlighting by this? So madgish zayin as da is nitaken pu'ule b'daimet z'maisa karbonis. That what's being done here is actually not similar to anything that we find by karbonis. V'alazah pu'ule from kaitzitz zayin dem oirev shel behema, because such a kind of action, to chop off the neck of the animal, v'luchat ashtarken etzem atzaver. The chopping off is because you're breaking the bone of the neck of the animal. Umit hakufitz kemin sakin gadol, which is a long knife, is behepech von shchita. It's an act which is very different and actually the opposite of when you shecht an animal. Was das macht noch starker die Scheile, and therefore it's this point that makes the question here stronger. Wie is das machaper? How is the act being done here serve as a kapare b'shas es nit bedoime und nochmals es behepech von akravas akarbonis? It's not similar in any way, and it's actually in nature the opposite of the way all other karbanos are brought when the shechita is done, which is the most unpainful death. And here it's dafke done in such a way where you're chopping off its neck and breaking the bone in its neck. And it's not even similar to the melika by a bird where it doesn't have that bone that you have to break. So that's why Rashi starts off with this point about Ofer Bekupitz, which shows us how different it is from what's being done with a carbon usually, and that leads us to the explanation of Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that there's a unique kapara here. The Rebbe is Rashi Echmam Shechomadgish, so that's why Rashi finds it necessary to continue and explain Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tova Yegla. Da is gesagt geworden Anaya Oifen von kapara. That here Hashem tells us a new kind of kapara, and that is Tova Egla Bashnasa Shleasa Peiris V'Torah V'Mokim She'ena Isa Peiris. You're bringing this calf, a year old, that didn't produce any fruits, didn't give birth, and you're chopping off its head in a place in this hard ground that didn't produce any fruits. And what's the point? What's unique about this kapara? What's the nature of this kapara? As alle inyanim da zenen durchais b'eifn shel shlida. The kapara here is highlighting the negativity of what happened here. Aleph egla bashnasa shaleyas peiris. We're bringing a calf that never gave birth. Beis te'aref, you're chopping off a painful death. And Gimel b'mokim she'ena isa peiris, and also highlighting the fact that this is a place that never produced anything. This is a kapara that's being done by highlighting and seeing the negative that happened here, that a person was killed and he couldn't do mitzvahs. Highlighting this brings out the kapara by highlighting the negative, and that brings the tshuva and the kapara for what happened here. That's what's unique about this kind of kapara. So the usual kaparas of a carbon, when you come lifnei Hashem, you sinned, did something and rebelled against Hashem, so you come in front of Hashem to achieve that kapara. In this case, the kapara is achieved by focusing on the negative that happened and then seeing how bad this is. That's what brings the kapara. That's what's unique about this kind of kapara. Here the Rebbe will continue further contrasting Rashi's approach to what the Egla Rufa is with what it says in other Rishonim, and then give us even a deeper understanding what's unique with this kapara. From the inyanim muflaim bepirish Rashi, from the wondrous ideas that we can take out, and this is an expression that Rebbe uses taken from the Shla HaKadosh that says that you can find matters of halacha and all kinds of things in Rashi. So here we can take what Rashi says and contrast it to what the Rambam and other Rishonim say regarding the Egla Rufa. Al pi anal yishlema as Rashi and the Rambam l'shitasayu ozli in the Pirish for Nachal Eisan. Rashi and the Rambam are following their approach to how they understand what the kapara of Egla Rufa is, and that's why they have a different interpretation in the words Nachal Eisan. Rashi is mefarish kanal. Rashi explains, as quoted before, that Nachal Eisan is kosher shaloi nevat. It's a place where the ground is tough and therefore it was never worked with, never planted, never used. The Rambam says, Nachal sheshetet b'chaska. This is a place where there's a stream that flows with force. When the pasuk says it's not worked with and not planted, this is an isa of la'aba. That's not speaking about explaining what kind of place this is now, but it's telling us something that's forbidden for the future, that area for the future will never be allowed to work there and plant anything there. So we can say, as the machlokes is nitnar in Pirish HaKosef. The argument here between Rashi and the Rambam is not just an argument in the accurate translation of the words Nachal Eson, nor es ist verbunden euch mit der Plukte in dem etzem Geder HaKapare von Egla Rufa. They're really arguing about really defining the kapara, the atonement of Egla Rufa. The Rambam is masber in Meire Nevuchim. The Rambam in the Meire Nevuchim explains the time of bringing an Egla Rufa uprati and yaneh. What's the reason for this mitzvah of Egla Rufa and the details that go along with it? As does an tachbulois, welche gib ma Meglichkeit, as der Ritzeach soll nesgale werden. This is all a strategy of how to maybe uncover who the murderer was. And in the words of the Rambam himself, V'efsher ala roiv, it's not possible in most cases in machakire with an investigation, v'yitzias hazakanim, and then the elders of the city coming out to this place, v'hoimdim and the other people, the bystanders, v'lekichas ha'egla, and bringing the calf, shulayirbu divrei b'nei adam, that it shouldn't become the talk of all the people. V'ulai b'pirsa me'inyin yivada aidik, and then by publicizing this matter, the murderer and what happened here will become known. And there's Messiah, and then the Rambam concludes, v'chizuk ze'inyin, and to even strengthen this more, this area where the Egla Rufa was done, so then for the future you can't plant there, you can't work there at all, forever. So what this will do there is it will motivate the owner of this piece of land that he'll do everything in his possibility to find the murderer, to get to the bottom of this. He'll investigate the matter until he'll find who the murderer was, in order that they should not have to bring the Egla Rufa on his property, and then he won't be able to use this area forever. He loses his ability to use it. That's the point of the mitzvah according to the Rambam. The Ramban here in Chumash explains, when he speaks about the fact that it's brought in a place which is Nachal Eson, as lefidaiti yesh beitam ki inyan karbonis hanasim bachutz, that in my opinion, he says this is similar to other karbonis that are brought outside, which is the Sara Mishtaleach, as we mentioned before, the goat in Yom Kippur that's sent away, or Paraduma, and the Paraduma which is done outside the Beis HaMikdash. Ulefichach monu chachamim egla rufa miklal hachukim. The Egla Rufa is part of those mitzvahs that are called chukim, where there's no explanation for the details of what this mitzvah is. Similar here, this is a kapara that is done by bringing the Egla Rufa in this place. It's a carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash. It's unusual. It's a chayk, just like the Sara Mishtaleach and the Paraduma. On Azay finden wir in Sefer Hayad from Rambam b'Seif Hilchas Milah. The Rambam in Sefer Hayad says different than he says in Meir Nevuchim. The Aladrai there, when the Rambam speaks about the karbanis being in the category of chukim, so he mentions the three together: Egla Rufa, Paradum, and Sara Mishtaleach. Werden dort gerechen zusammen als chukim. They're mentioned there together as being chukim. These are karbanis that we can't explain the details of why and how they're done. Now then we come back to Rashi. Rashi bringt up by contrast. When we see what Rashi says here, Rashi gives reasons, explaining the details why the Egla, why this kind of location. According to Rashi, the Egla Rufa cannot be categorized as a chayk because Rashi is bringing what the Gemara says, an explanation for the details of why the Egla is chosen and why in this location. So we have here three different approaches to what the inyan of Egla Rufa is. The Rambam in Meir Nevuchim, then the Ramban, and the Rambam in Sefer Hayad, and Rashi. V'yeshleimar, as those in drei, Eifanim, wie we can lernen dem Gedef Akapare von Egla Rufa. So what we see here is three different approaches in understanding what the kapara of Egla Rufa consists of. Is it mitzad and poil? Is the main thing we're focusing on the actors in this? The people, what they're doing and what they're expressing by what they're doing? Or is it mitzad the pu'ula b'chlalusa? Or is it the act itself of what's being done here in the general sense? Or mitzad dem nifal? Or are we looking at the result of what's being done here with the Egla Rufa umekaima and also the place where it's done? And the Rebbe elaborates. Aleph, one approach is Lefi Rambam b'Meir Nevuchim. According to the Rambam, as he explains it in Moed Nevuchim, is the kapara mitzad hapoyel. The kapara that's brought about through the egla rufa is because of the people, of the actors, what they do. The shas die ziknei ir akrev malacholol tun the alle peulois bichteitz megala zayin dem ritzeach, when the elders of the city that are closest to the place where the dead body was found are doing all these things to investigate and to publicize the matter. So people should then say who this murderer was. Is das gufa of zemechaper. That itself, this effort to uncover what happened here, is the reason for the atonement. Es nemt up from zeidem oven. This removes from them the sin that they're trying to get to the bottom of the matter. Zois void. There's another point here why the effort that the people, the ziknei ir, what they're doing, brings about the kapara. Die kapara besteht nicht nur in dem, was sie tun alle mine peules, as es soll nisgal werden der Ritzeach. The kapara consists not only of the fact that they're doing whatever it is in their hands, all the investigation and publicizing this, to find the murderer. Nor euch, weil mit dem sind sie mefarsim bepirsum godel, what they're also publicizing to the greatest degree possible, as chayfetz as a kainim, v'anshi adas, is gefinnen dem Ritzeach, linkai mimenu nikmas Ritzeach. That the desire of the elders and the important people here is to find this murderer and to take revenge and to punish him for what he's done. Und das gufe verhit und wurzelt eis der Minyan for Ritzicha. And this will prevent and uproot any such things of happening again. Ubemele is das gufe mechaper. So therefore it's this effort of the ziknei ir that brings about the atonement. So it's the poil. What they're expressing, what the people doing are expressing by the investigation and by publicizing the matter that brings about the kapara. Beis, another approach here is like the Ramban. According to the Ramban, similar according to the Rambam in Silchas Meila, is das mitzad der pola. The kapara is the action that's being done, is like the valderech inyan karbonis, just like by a carbon when you shech, then you spray the blood and you bring on the mizbeach. The actions itself is the source of the kapara. That all karbonis are also in the category of chukim. The actions that are done with the karbonis are a chayk that bring about a kapara. As the po'ula or kapara from karbonis is mitzad the maisa akrava. The action and the kapara comes from what you do when you makriv an animal. Al derech says by egla rufa was kapara nema ba kachim. The term kapara is used here like by all kachim. Das heißt punkt wie bei alle karbonis is this gzeiras hamelach. What's done by all karbonis is a decree of the king. As yet the carbon is mechaparev and averes nusiyemes. Every carbon with these particular acts that the Hashem says should be done to sacrifice this carbon brings a kapara for a particular aveda. Al derech zeh and up uleis hakarbanis mesiyames shebachotz, the particular actions that have to be done with those karbanis that are brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash, the Sar HaMishtaleach, the goat that's sent off to the mountain to be thrown off on Yom Kippur, the Para Aduma, and then the Egla Rufa was Gzeras Hamelachi. It's a decree of the king. As oich di meise zol mechaper sein. Although it's different than the way it's usually done with other karbanis that are brought in the Beis Hamikdash, but here it's a gzeiras melach that it should be brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and this is the kapara. That's the explanation of the Ramban's opinion, focusing on the pu'ula. The act that's being done, the way Hashem designs it, is the source of the kapara. Then we come back to Rashi, Gimel, Ladas Rashi. The third approach is Rashi's approach. That you bring the calf that's a year old in the place that was never worked with. This is a third approach. As the kapara is nit mitzad the poil, the source of the kapara is not the effort of the actors, or the pu'ula b'chlal, or the action that's done in the general sense, the way the Eibishter designs every carbon, what the actions are. Bedugmas hakabanis, no mitzad dem nifal. Here, the kapara is related to the result of what happened here. Hanirtzach, both regarding the person that was found dead, and also the egla hanerefes, and regarding the result of what you have here when you chop off the head of this calf. And as Rashi says, Tovai egla bashnosa, shulei ossa peiris, you bring this calf that's a year old, that didn't give birth, v'te'orei b'mokim she'ena isa peiris, and it should be left to be there without a head that expresses the negativity of the situation that it can't give birth. Val the kapare is nit nor of meiser etziche von retzeach, because over here, what we're focusing on in the kapare is not just the act of the murder that happened, But we're actually coming to atone for the result of what happens in the case when a person is murdered. That we're coming to atone for what happens when a person's life is lost, that now we didn't give him the opportunity to continue producing fruits to do mitzvahs. That's what the kapara is focused on. The nifal, the outcome of what happens when a person is killed, and therefore also here the kapara is with the outcome of what happens with this calf, that now it can't give birth either. This is why Rashi uses the expression of Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem says that this is something new. Here Hashem is telling us a new kind of atonement, not similar to the way it is by other kaparas that we have regarding karbanos of kachim, including not the carbon that's brought outside, or somewhat a carbon that's brought outside. That's what's unique about Rashi's opinion. So now we come back to seeing the difference between Rashi and the Rambam and how they translate the words Nachal Esan, the location where the Egla Rufa is done. With this, we understand very well the difference in how we explain the words Nachal Esan. According to the Rambam's reasoning of what the kapara is about, it's understood this means a place where there is a stream that's rushing or that's flowing with a force. It actually does not refer to a ground that's tough that never was worked with. Nor as mikam ve'elech is do alav shelo yavid by. Rather, when it says in the pasuk lo yavid, it's only referring to the future. But loyd zayin tam, according to the Rambam's reasoning, which is poilin as the baal asad the yasa kol tachbula v'yachker oid, or ad sheivada ha'heirig, is that the owner of this territory will do whatever it is in his hands to investigate the matter until he'll find a murderer, so that they shouldn't have to now do the egla rufe here, and then it will be forbidden to use this area. Is oidus volt gemeint a karka. So if this refers to a piece of land, you have to choose a piece of land which is of the best quality, that the owner is very concerned that he won't be able to use his best piece of property to plant there. Was dann wird es mehr onrir in dem Balasode und wird sich mehr mestadel sein zu gefinnen dem Retzeach shleiteas arz leilam. This is something that he'll be very concerned about, and he'll do whatever it is to find the murderer, so that this best piece of territory should not become Oster forever to use. The File learned the Rambam, so therefore the Rambam says, as Nachal Esan meitnit karka. Nachal Esan, the words Nachal Esan does not refer to a description of the nature of this ground that's hard and tough. Not a Nachal Shomayim sheshetev b'chaska. Rather, it's referring to a stream of water that flows in this place and therefore makes it very fertile ground to plant there. And that will be the motivation for the owner to investigate this matter. Al derech zeh, similar is Latam Rambam b'Sifrei Hayad. According to what the Rambam says in Sefer Hayad, that there he says that this is a chayk v'baltas as a kapara begeder v'suga karbanis. Since the atonement here is in the same category as you find by all karbanis, is mistaver as the art from the arifa daf nezayin bedafka akaka kosher shalei nevad. So it follows to say that the mitzvah here of this arifa, of this carbon, sort of, should not be in a place that's a very low quality, place that doesn't produce anything. Nafaket, vasmer nifchar, amakim meshubach, but it should actually be the best quality of a place, of a location should be chosen for this kapara that should be done here. Loit Rashi aber, by contrast, when it comes to Rashi, Vibal Tazda is nishtane v'nischadish Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's something unique and different here that the Eibishter says. It says nischadish gewaren anaye suk von kapara kanal. Here, there's a new kind of kapara that we don't find anywhere else. Is mistaver as azevi de eglo is shalei osasa peiris, that just like we see regarding the calf itself that's chosen, and the reason is to point out the negativity of what the murderer did here, that it doesn't produce fruits, and this eglo did not give birth. Und the pu'ula is arife, and also what's being done here is to chop off its head in yone shlila, focusing on the negative of what happened here by the person that was found dead. Darf euch der mokim sein von shlila. So therefore, it follows that the location that's chosen that this should be done also expresses this negativity. Azah she'eno yisaperis. A location that cannot produce fruits. Eison, kosher, shalei nevad, a place that's hard and tough that never was worked with, never produced anything. As nitna mikano lahaba dafa zayin an art she'eno isapetis, that not only going forward is this a place that will not produce fruits, no beike b'hoive, but now at the time b'sha'asa arifa, when you chop off its head, muze zayin an eson kosher shalei nevad, a place that's hard and tough that was never worked with, ena isapetis, a place that doesn't produce the fruits. And that's the place chosen for this unique kind of kapara that's focusing on the nifal, that's focusing on the outcome of what happens when a person is murdered. And here the kapara is coming by focusing on this negativity that brings about the kapara. Okay, now here the Rebbe goes forward, taking a lesson from all of this for us. HaTeira hi nitzchis, everything in Teira is eternal. Is move on so it's understood. As the Hayrah from Parshas Egla Arufa, the lesson to be taken from this parsha of Egla Arufa is da b'chol hazmanim or b'chol hamekaymis zu alle Yidden. It's relevant in all times, in all places, and to all Yidden. Ubemyuchad in zman hagolas, actually, especially in the time of exile, was sat hashaychis zu minyan v'shvichas damim. The condition of exile is related to blood that was spilled. Varim beruchnius is man durch jeden chet b'maise dibur oy machshave, because spiritually speaking, any aveda, which is the cause for galus, whether in action or in speech or in thought, gairim dem inyan fun, this causes spiritually spilling blood. From shvichas dam v'chayis adam de kedusha, b'adam de klippe. You're spilling and taking out the energy, the blood of holiness, and bringing it into a place of klippe, the opposite of holiness. And das is a hayrah nefla. And here we have a wondrous lesson that we can take from the way the mitzvah of Egla Arufa is done. Men red vegin, what we're speaking about here is, as the Torah begins this parsha, Yemotzei cholol ba'adama neifel basada. A dead body is found on the ground, and where did he fall? Where is he found? Out of the city, out in the field. Was not in dem fall kementainen. When this is the case, one may come and argue as follows. Vibalt as ein mise beloichet. Since we know there's no case where a person dies if it wasn't caused by an aveda that he did. Is doch sicher as das is meis Hashem? So definitely the fact that this person is found dead is something it comes from Hashem. Val derech maimer azal, similar to what the Gemara says, b'negei lechet b'shoigig, ofen pasuk v'halakim min liyada, in a case where a person was accidentally killed, that there's a history behind this and there's a reason why Hashem orchestrates this to happen. Is there make ish is aritzeach? So true, the one that murdered him is a murderer. On him kumt an einish gadol. He deserves a great punishment. But if the case here is that we can't identify who this is, especially according to what the Gemara and as Rashi quotes say, as the Egla Arufa kum pe'iker al harigase shel zeh shalei nichu lasis pedis, that the Egla Arufa is coming to atone for this person that was killed that did not get an opportunity to produce pedis. What is the pedis referring to? It refers to Torah mitzvahs. That means that this person, even when he was alive, didn't have Torah mitzvahs to shield him, to protect him. And that's why he was killed and he's dead here. If so, one can argue and say, regarding the victim, this is a decree from heaven, that because of his avedis, that it was decreed upon him that he should die. So kemetrachten, if so you could think, as man hat to them ken shayches nit, that it's not our business to get involved in this. Und man darf sich damit nicht vernehmen. And therefore we don't have to get involved here to try to figure out how we can get a kapara for this, that near this city a person is found dead. It's a matter between this person that died and Hashem, that he didn't do mitzvahs, and therefore he deserved to die. Well, similar, one may argue beruchnius, spiritually speaking. When you encounter a yid that you see that's on a very low level, neifel umvu basade, he fell very low, and where did he fall very low? In a field. In what field is he? He's in a place where Esav is, a man of the field, a man out in a place, in a bad place. A place that's far and opposite in nature than a settled place where people live. And here what this refers to is Vishachanti, where Hashem dwells. From the Adam Elyon Shalakise, the supernal being Hashem, which is on his holy throne. An art and svive from Torah mitzvahs, a location and an environment where there's Torah mitzvahs. And that's where you see this person that's away, far from this environment of Torah mitzvahs. And that's where you encounter the Yid. So one may say and make come to the following conclusion. Vemen's shuld is es, was der Yid gefindt sich in Azam Matzev. Whose fault is it, the fact that this Yid is in such a kind of condition? Hat sich gedarft gefinnen, nicht Basade, nor an Amakke Moshe Ve'ir, in Asviv, von Teire, Ve'ir Shemayim Cholo. It should be his business to be sure that he shouldn't be out in such a place, in such an environment. Let him be in a place where there's a city with people, with Yidden and Teire and Mitzvahs and Teire and Ve'ir Shemayim. Ubemele darfen die Yidden was gefinnen sich beir. So if that's the case, you may conclude that the people, the Yidden that are in the city, in Asviv von Yidden Shemayim Teire and Mitzvahs, in the environment of Yidden that are doing Teire and Mitzvahs, Bezdin, the elders and the Bezdin, nit vernehmen sich mit him. It's not their business to go and deal with this person that, to no fault other than himself, takes himself away and is in a place, basada, away from where Torah mitzvahs is. If them is Dairah from Parsha Egla Rufa, so for this we have the clear lesson from the Parsha of Egla Rufa. The person that's found outside, wandering, and here found dead, completely disconnected, spiritually speaking, in this place outside. Not only is this connected to the closest city where this person is found, the elders, the most important people of the city, have to come out here. Zum Bezdin von der Stadt, to the Bezdin of the city. Bis das riert an dem Bezdin HaGadol, and the great Bezdin of Yerushalayim, v'yatzu zekenecha, miyuchoden shebezekenecha, eile Sanhedrin Gedaila, the Sanhedrin Gedaila of Yerushalayim has to come here and attend to this matter. Und die Zikne Bezen von dem Eir darf man machen sicher, and then the elders of this city have to be sure, and to announce this, that it should be known to everybody. We haven't spilled this blood. And what does this mean? Rashi Taich, as Rashi explains, we didn't find this person and then just let him go without giving him food or accompanying him improperly. What does this mean spiritually? As they gave him for what he needs for his way going out of the city, the Muslim from Teire. They gave him his food, which is Teire, the Teire is the food for the soul in a person's body. The proper garments that he needs, which are the mitzvahs, that protect one from the cold, the spiritual coldness that's outside, and from a bow and arrow or a sword. They gave him bread and garments that will accompany him even in such a darkness of exile. In the Maim of the Matzah from Sada, where is gegangen, in this field outside where this person went, which means that it's the obligation and the responsibility of the people and the elders of the city to provide for him spiritually everything he needs in wherever he goes. Furthermore, we say here, as das ist verbunden euch mit der Sanhedrin Gedaila shebelishkas hagazis. The Sanhedrin Gedaila, as mentioned, that sits in Yerushalayim and the Lishkas hagazis in the Beis Hamikdash, they also have to come out here. The L'chaire, seemingly you may ask, was for a shaychis haben sie mit dem Cholol was mat gefunden? What connection do they have to this person that's found dead here? Nit besmichas Yerushalayim. It's not anywhere near Yerushalayim. No, it's an andere weite Stadt, ergens wo in Eretz Yisrael, to a different city further away, somewhere in Eretz Yisrael. Steht aber in Tana de Velio Rabba. So the answer for this we have clearly what it says in the Tana de Velio, that what's proper for the Sanhedrin Gedaila that Moshe and Yeshua left for us. What do they have to do? To tie metal chains to their waists, to lift up their clothing above their ankles, to be able to go to far places. And they have to make their way around all cities of Yidden. One day to the city Lachish, and to come to all cities where Yidden are. V'yalamdu es Yisrael, to teach Yidden what they have to do. Kadesh Yizgadol, v'yizkadesh, shmoish lakadosh baruch hu, is to bring the holiness and the greatness of the Eibusher into the worlds. So they can't just sit in their place in the Lishkas Hagazis and Yerushalayim and wait for anybody to come to them for any matters, but they have to make their way out to go and to tend to the matters of Yidden in all cities of Eretz Yisrael. And then take note of the following of what it says there. As in Tana de Ve'eliyahu, Rabbi Ved das gesagt, B'negeya di shivim elef shenergu begivas Binyamin. This is said there regarding the terrible tragedy that happened by the mountain of Binyamin, where there is a very, very tragic incident from Shevet Binyamin that brought about that there was 70,000 Yidden that were killed. As leharag oisan ela Sanhedrin Gedayla chulu. Who's the one to blame for this? The Sanhedrin Gedayla, that when they wollten areis Yara Yisrael v'chulu, if they would go out and educate Yidden and be there for the Yidden in all their cities, wollten gekommen zu Meise Pelegesh begiven. The whole story that happened there with the Pelegesh, with Shevet Binyamin, when 70,000 Yidden were killed, would have not come to happen. Allah has kama v'kama, most definitely, when it's retzach wegen Yidden, was gefinnen sich basada. When you see Yidden that are found out in the field, amokim on Torah or mitzvahs, a place where there is no environment of Torah or mitzvahs, so this is not in Ayoris Yisrael, but even further out in the field, as this is a chiyuv, v'achrayis, v'slik, tev bezin Yisrael. That this is an obligation and the responsibility that lies upon the bezin of the Yidden to go and tend to this Yid to make sure that he has what he needs in this place. Und das is the Hayrah for jeden Yidden b'yameinu eila. This is the lesson for all Yidden in our times. Ubefrat in dem Zman von Chodesh Elul, especially in the time when we read Parsha Shoftim in the beginning of the month of Elul, as in Dafareis game b'mokim mishavi b'nei Yisrael. We all have to go out into different places where Yidden live. Euchen an Ort, was is nit kin svive von Torah und Mitzvahs, Sade. A place where Yidden live that could be defined as a field, outside of a place of environment of Torah Mitzvahs. Und reis helfen jeden Yidden in Meire sein, to assist all Yidden and to inspire them. As in dem Zman von Elul gefindt sich der Melech Malchi Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Basada. That in the time of the month of Elul, out there in the field where the Yid is, the Eibusha comes down there to him. On his Mekabel Yidden and receives everybody in Vasfar Amayim the Matzav Zal Zayin, in whatever condition he may be. Besave upon him Yafais with a smiling and happy face, Umara upon him Shecha Kais Lekulam, and shows that smiling face to everybody. Und das Gufe helft Areis, dem Yidden Areis zu gehen, von der Maimon der Matzav von Sada. This itself will assist and draw the Yid out of this condition of being out there in the field, and welcher gefindt sich, where he finds himself. Und demult, and then, this is in the mashal that Alter Rebbe says, and look at the Torah, that Alter Rebbe continues and says, is Belechtoi HaMelech Chayira. When the king then returns and goes back into the city, Hareim Hoilchem Acharov. The people then will follow the king in the Zman von Yomim Neiraim. This refers to the time after the month of Elul, where we follow the Eibishter in the days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when Memala B'Kodesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We fulfill Hashem's request, Shetam Lichuni Aleichem, that Hashem should be crowned as our king, bis zu dem Kaper Lamcha Yisrael, to bring the full kapara for Yidden, b'yom HaKippurim, wenn es wird aufgetan die kapara, sliche und mechile, for jeden Yidden, for ganz Klal Yisrael, for all Yidden, and for every individual Yid and all Yidden, und salachti kid varecha, and Hashem forgives like your words, the way Moshe Rabbeinu demands it. Und jeder eine wird nichta v'nechtam, and every single Yid will be written and sealed la'alter immediately b'sifra shel tzadikim gemurim, in the book of the tzadikim gemurim that are written into good life for the coming year.